Hello, and welcome to the Speaking Truth to Power podcast. I am one of your hosts, Victoria Fenton, and I'm here with my co-host, Alex Fraysse. Say hello to our millions of listeners, Alex.
Hello, millions of listeners. An absolute pleasure to see you all for our first episode.
Absolutely, right. So, revealing a few of the secrets a little bit, I will confess to our millions of listeners that we did record this all last week, and we're blaming Mercury for the technical snafu, even though Mercury probably wasn't retrograde and had nothing to do with it. It was just my incompetence, your incompetence, either. So
Team effort.
Team effort at really making rubbish audio for a podcast. So we are going to try and recreate some of the magic of last week, but we are also going to try and be a bit more focused, which is good for you guys. So, Alex, why are we doing a podcast?
Because we have nothing better to do on our already extremely busy lives. Of course. No.
If only that were true, to be fair. Like,
if only that was true, I know, right?
So where did this start? We were talking one night, we were texting one night, and you sent me a message saying podcast. So where did that come from for you?
Yeah. So that came from because we talk about an absolute array of wonderful and fabulous things, which I feel the majority of people would benefit from listening to. And it's almost selfish of us to keep the type of things we talk to ourselves, because not only are we incredibly hilarious amongst ourselves, I feel as if we have a very beautiful complementary view on life. So Victoria, I'm sure you also agree, like we don't always see things exactly the same way, but we are very much open and able to have beautiful discussions around things, which allow us to then dive deeper into aspects of life and aspects of ourselves. So hopefully that can become something that can elucidate something within others. And we also definitely believe in it's becoming a bit of an annoying term to use, but a holistic way of looking at things. So mind, body, and spirit, not just, let's call it the biohacking crew, who are very much into, hacking their bodies and sometimes their minds. But when it comes to doing soul work, none of them have apparently any issues whatsoever to do with any ancestry or mother and father wounding, or nothing is possibly ever their fault.
Of course.
And then the functional medicine community, who basically are only just body based. But then you also have like spiritual communities who are only spiritual based, let's say, whether it be Reiki healers or quantum healers or whatever it is. I think you probably feel the same way. Like, there's nothing that really encompasses it all in together. And I think you and I have been doing this for a considerable amount of time now, that everything that we do is very much integrated into one. Like, there's no separation, everything's interconnected. It's a beautiful spider's web. And I feel as if a lot of people would benefit from learning more about that. And even if we are just a key for them to, open that door, and then they find loads of other portals, I think like job done. I don't think we're here to be gurus or any of this type of nonsense. I think we're just here to share what we believe and to have open discussions and to allow others to open their minds about it.
That's a shame. I was hoping for guru status. Is that not like work? And I would echo all of that. So we did say this on our non-audible recording, but we have been in the same room about twice in our lives. But we have, for various reasons, crossed paths in various other communities where neither of us knew each other were present, and yet we found each other there. And so we have very rich and varied text message conversations all the time, and they range from arguments, although very conscious arguments about conversations that mean something to either of us, to descending into hilarity, which we will try not to go that far, in a public forum, please. Note to self, Alex. And
But I'll try.
yeah, and the whole gamut of everything. And we do have very different, but also very similar ways of doing what we do in our professional worlds. And also, I think we have mutually and collectively a lot to offer in terms of we have been doing this work in the trenches and really do understand things from that horrible word, but that holistic perspective. So when we said, well, when you said podcast, I was like, instant yes, but also let me think about it because that's a lot. And here we are. So clearly we both went forward with our instincts and we're like, yes, this is what we should do. So, and also for me, and this is speaking very personally, there's a lot of sort of identities that I've constructed for my professional life, and there's a kind of titles that I have, and hopefully doing this podcast will be a great vehicle for me to just be me for a change, just really be all of me in terms of showing up, sharing, particularly the spiritual side of me, which people probably suspect or think of, or maybe not even know. So there's a lot of that. So very exciting. So in the spirit of an introductory episode, for our listeners in the future, other than our friends and family who will be the first people to listen to this, who is Alex Fraysse? What do you do? And give us a little bit of your background and your story.
Okay, so I've actually just been let out of a mental asylum. I say been let out, I actually broke out. I left my orange jumpsuit under the bed, but please don't tell anybody. No, so, okay, so a bit of background. My name is Alex Fraysse. I went to boarding school. So I went to an all-boys boarding school, 5 years. Was brought up and raised in a certain in a certain way, which is very actually kind of holistic at the same time. So I was never really put on medications when I was younger. There's like homeopathic medicine, special creams, arnica, stuff like that. Boarding school was a very formative part of my life. It closed off a lot of my innate, let's call it spirituality, so to speak, because it's very much a form of self-protectionism. When you're there for 5 years and essentially just trying to bloody survive. And I then, from that aspect, it formed me into wanting to become like my father. So I wanted to go into banking. So like my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. So I wanted to, follow the family lineage and do what they did and make them proud and, all that type of horseshit. Which, everyone is entitled to want to follow, but, you got to be your own person. So I did that for about 3.5 years, 4 years. I then had an incredible spiritual experience at a festival in Portugal called Boom Festival in 2012. When I was already on the journey to spirituality, but I was more from the mental aspect. I wasn't really in the heart aspect. And that festival dropped me into the heart and allowed me to see and understand why I always felt different, so to speak. And then a year later, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who got back from it was that summer. He got back from Burning Man. I asked him, what did you learn? Apparently, a lot of people have incredible formative experiences. He's like, nah, man, it's just a sex, drug, you're partying, man. And it was at that point in my life when I was like, I'm out. I can't do this shit anymore. Like, no way, man. Like, this isn't the life that I want. And then 3 weeks later, I was enrolled in my course to study nutrition, herbal medicine, naturopathy, and iridology. So normally that takes about 7 to 8 years to do it. I did it in 4.5 because, like I said, I've been let out of a mental asylum, and it was a wonderful experience. And alongside of that, a lot of spiritual awakenings and growth, and working with my father wound, my mother wounds, helping my father out of a period of tremendous grief when my stepmom passed away. So I moved back in with him to look after him for about 3 years. An incredibly challenging but beautiful time in which I can look back on fondly for growth. And kind of all these things started enabling me to become who I am. I become initiated into an African tradition called the Bwiti tradition, again, which very much resonates with my spirituality and my path and the way that I work and the way that I see things. It's all interconnected, nothing is separate. And that's kind of what has been very, very formative for me. And I've worked in, fasting retreats. I've worked in a health optimization biohacking clinic and done all that type of stuff, and learned a lot of essentially what I don't want, to be honest. Quite frankly, I'd say 80% of it say, right, I definitely do not want to do this. I don't want to practice like this. I don't want to think like this. And it allowed me to see how I do want to do things, which is much more integrated, much more in connection and in commune with nature. And I find that that's kind of where my work comes from. It's very much a connection to nature, to plants. Because when you connect to nature, you connect back to yourself and to your true essence of who you are. And my work is getting you to connect back to who you are, because you have all the keys and all the codes yourself. You just sometimes need certain people to activate them, to unlock them, and then it's up to you to walk through the door, so to speak. So that's kind of a brief memo where I am. I could go on for much longer, but I feel as if it is Victoria's turn to share her bit of the journey.
My bit of the journey. Okay, so a little bit similar to you, certainly for a lot of my childhood, I was never really given medication, not really, my mum was always very, complementary medicine oriented. And that was just what it was. We weren't even particularly strange as a family. It was just like our bookshelves from when I was very young were lined with, Donna Eden's energy medicine and, the symbolic meaning of like symptoms. It's a little tiny book, The Body is the Barometer of the Soul, and all that kind of stuff. That was my teenage life. And then very successful in school, doing all the things. And when I was 17, I was on holiday in Mallorca and was incredibly violently sick. And at that point, I ruptured my esophagus. Now, that's a very simple way of explaining it, because actually I had no idea of that at the time. So it took me into a very, very long journey of illness, essentially. So from that moment, which was 2003, summer of 2003, I then was ill for a further roughly 15 years. And anybody who's done the math, that takes us to quite recently. So there's been a lot of stuff for me. And initially, because of what was happening to me, and I basically was incredibly digestively unwell. So I was regurgitating absolutely everything that I tried to eat, and nobody knew why. So obviously, when you're a high achieving grade A student, 17-year-old, everyone diagnoses you with an eating disorder within about a second. And suddenly I was faced with this. People are telling me I'm making myself sick. Am I making myself sick? Because I don't think I am. I think I'm being ill. And so my first step on the path was self-awareness, because I needed to understand whether what people were saying to me was actually true. Like, is there a part of me that's trying to self-sabotage? All of that. So I started trying to resolve my illness through inner work, self-development, trying to look inwards, trauma therapy, release, assessing all of my life, basically trying to work out what was going on. And it was the most transformational part of my experience and my journey. It didn't fix things. It didn't get me to the point where I knew what was happening. So I was always bouncing in and out of hospitals, several near-death experiences, which again are very spiritual in nature, and always like doing the work with battling this conventional medicine perspective that I was creating my own issues, my soul perspective, which was like, I am creating and inviting my own issues, but it's not in the way you think I am. Like, this is very confusing. And at a very young age, exposed to lots of mysticism and depth and not really resolving anything. And then at the point where I was about to go through another hospitalization experience and all the things happened around that, I eventually found a diagnosis for what I have from a physiological perspective. So we eventually realized that I have a connective tissue disorder that's genetic. And all of the symptoms that I was having, including neurological symptoms, immune system symptoms, and all of my digestive symptoms, can be linked back to that. And I have my delightful letter from a rheumatologist, which said basically that my previous decade could be explained by this final diagnosis. And that's the point where we finally realized that the esophagus rupture was part of having very fragile and lax connective tissue. And I thought I would get help from the medical departments, and finally they'd accept me and like give me the things. And like, I was so bought into having pills by that point. You have no idea. I was like, just give me just drugs. It's fine. But of course I reacted to all the drugs, didn't find any solutions. So that's the point at which I decided to fix myself and ended up doing the nutrition qualifications, functional medicine qualifications, way before it was cool in the UK. So this was about 2013 time. And very quickly got myself to a place where I actually wasn't emaciated. I was, way healthier than I had been. And it sort of started a 7-year period for me, which was running away from the spirituality into functional medicine, nutrition, all of those kinds of things. And certainly for the first part of that journey, I was very much bought into the, physiological foundations of everything. And I still am to a degree, but the last few years, I've really kind of realized that the spirituality side of it was the most important part for me. It was life-changing, and I needed to understand the physiological foundations, but that wasn't the healing. The healing for me is actually stepping right back into the spiritual and the soul level work. So recently I'm very much trying to move my business, which has been a very successful functional medicine nutrition practice for a long time, but always holistic, always focusing on the nervous system, always looking deeper. I'm really making the conscious effort this year to move that into all of my kind of coaching qualifications, because I've done all of the kind of CBT, NLP, somatic release stuff, emotional trauma work, all of those kinds of things. And I'm sort of ready to take off the protective robes of need my functional medicine science brain and step into, a real soul-centered coaching inner work business. So, and that's why at the start of this, I alluded to hopefully this podcast being a bit of a vehicle to be really me and to really step into that, centered, intuitive, spiritual, mystical kind of place. And that's where I am today. So that's again an incredibly brief nutshell of the trauma of like histories. But I think to just like highlight that bit, this is why you and I have a very kind of deep awareness of all the things that go through, because we've really done the work. Like, we've been in the journey. We have taken those experiences of pain or whatever it is, or not feeling like we fit in, and really dug inwards to try and find ourselves, essentially.
Agreed. Yeah. And like, to use a term we actually used in the last one, our failed recording. We've, you and I have both been in the gutter.
Oh yeah.
Like, we've been in there, like, we've already bathed in it, and showered and washed, and done all the lot with all the stuff in the gutter. And of course, it doesn't mean like we're done with it. I mean, it's just the part of the fact that we've done a tremendous work of being down there and facing essentially your truest and your deepest, darkest fears, and all the stuff that you suppress for years and years, and all the stuff that you're not even aware of has affected you. That has that subconscious and unconscious effect on you. And then all the aspects of your own lineages, so your father's side of the family, your mother's side of the family, their sides, and then also your previous past lives, and then let's say your spiritual ancestry as well, and all the stuff you have to deal with in order to become more and more of who you are. And removing as many of those, I believe you have to remove all those attachments in essence, so you can truly be completely free of it. But it's very much like the archer being put, the arrow being pulled back, and like, oh God, when's this ever going to end? And then it lets go, and you're just jet propelled until the next stage where it's again the same thing. And it's always a very powerful and interesting process. I always say, as long as you are open to seeing what is actually there for you to see. And I think within the type of work that we do, not only on ourselves, but also with our clients, that is a big foundational part of, this is why you're fucked up. And I could use better language, but realistically, like, this is where your shit is, and this is where you have to deal with it. And you can only, and I think this as well as I do, you can only make people see as much as they're willing to see, and you can't push people. It has the adverse effect of, you push and they'll push back harder, and instead of being here, like, you're all the way back here, you're like, oh man, I'm like at step -1 instead of being at step 1.
And it's a huge part of the reason why I am conscientiously rebranding, because if I'm attracting people into my business that really want the functional medicine, nutrition, silver bullet, take a supplement, it's almost like conventional medicine. It's like the pill solution to everything. Whereas I take people on deep journeys, and don't get me wrong, a lot of my current clients will go on those journeys with me because they see that it's relevant. But sorry, for anyone who's like not watching the video version of this podcast, we do have 2 mascots, which we will talk about in a second. And one of them's just come in to play with Alex for a second. So yeah, demanded attention. Just don't talk to anyone else. Don't think it's like global reach. No. But yeah, so just to finish that point, so for me, you know, conscientiously taking people on a journey, and like I once joked to a colleague that I should put on my website, you know, don't apply for my services if you don't want to go on a journey. And he said, do it. I never did. And here I am over a year and a half later, actually going, do you know what, that's going on my website because it's really relevant. And it's really relevant that when you choose people to go on these journeys with, you have people who can hold that space in that container for you to see the things, because it's not always, you know, sunshine and rainbows and bit of darkness and then back into sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes it really is turning over a rock and finding your kind of broken heart underneath it, and there needs to be safety in the container that supports you to do that. And so a lot of my hope when we go forward recording this podcast is to be an embodied example of how space can be held, and how people who are looking for people to help them on this journey can see authentic representation of people who are, you know, coaches or therapists or whatever we call ourselves, you know, healers, rather than the kind of weight of noise on Instagram or the internet, which is just people saying they've done the work, saying they can hold the containers, saying they can, you know, be the example. And all of my shackles go up, and I'm like, you can't hold, you certainly couldn't hold me in a container. Like, and I know I'm like a weight, and there's a lot of kind of, you know, stuff. But yeah, so it's very, very important that if people are at all inspired at any point through the podcasts that we record and what we share, and then inspired to go and open those doors, as you said earlier, just touch into self to really understand whether the container you're approaching is a safe space to do this work, because it's not easy.
Oh yeah, completely agreed. There are what I call Instagram charlatans. A dime a dozen. They're bloody everywhere. It's like, I'm a priestess and I can hold you. I'm an embodied man and I can hold. Like, no, you're not. It's all a show, and but it's part of the theater in which we live in. And I feel that social media exacerbates or even puts that theater on a pedestal. So you can almost like live vicariously through these people. But a lot of these people, you have to realize, are out there on these platforms to make money.
And also fulfill the emptiness inside themselves, which they haven't dealt with.
Exactly. It's that external seeking a gratification over and over again. It's quite painful to see in a way, because I feel bad for the people that get dragged into it. And I in the past have been dragged into it by 1 or 2 people, and you know, that was a learning experience of like, no way, like just, you know, when you have that deeper chat with them, you're like, mate, you're not there, like you're a lot of talk, you're all fluff, you're all hot air.
Interesting, because I didn't know that about you, that you've been like pulled in and stuff like that. And I think you do get triggered by it a bit more than I do. And that's not a judgment thing. It's just I sort of tend to just not listen. But we've had the conversations before where like I've said to you, you know, this is part of their karma and their journey, and karma will go for them. We don't need to like point out their flaws or get into this kind of meritocracy of spirituality or hierarchy of inner work. Like, that's none of that is relevant or true, because if we're sitting in a place of judgment on these people, that's like, we need to then go inwards and do our work, because that's our judgment, not them. But I think it is when we are healers and we work in healthcare, the conscientiousness about how to really hold people means that our concern is more for the people who aren't familiar with what is necessary and don't have that instinctive, oh no, you haven't done the work, and will be taken in with these kind of acts, is what they are, performances.
They're wonderful actors, and I in a way, it sounds weird, I have a tremendous amount of respect for them for how they do their business, because they're very diligent, and they're very what's the word I'm looking for, consistent. They're always there, and they're always showing up, or whatever it is. So I have a respect for them, and it's impressive in the stuff that they do. It's always interesting when you can see, or you've done the work with someone who holds and contains, and you're like, I can bare my absolute soul to this person, and then they're not going to move. They're going to be like, cool, I got you. You scream, you shout, you do your thing. And I have, what was the word I want to say? I feel that is one of the most important parts of a healing journey. And in the terms of the work that we've been doing within ourselves and with the clients, it's about enabling that capacity for them to be held and to feel safe. And something that I feel is also important is how much of a support network do they have around them outside of us? Do they have friends? Do they have family? Do they have online group workshop calls, or do they have a community around them? Do they have some people who they fall back on, or do they not? And then to me, that always leads me to the question of, okay, well, if you don't have as much support externally, the levels of how deep you go have to be different. Because if you are going to go for the first time, super, super deep, you're going to realize, oh man, my foundations are going to get completely crumbled here, because I have to rebuild completely new ones. So, there are levels in how deep you take people at different stages of their life. Not everyone needs to go, straight down to the pits of hell. Some people just need to take a few steps down first. And then when they're stable, like, okay, cool, I kind of know what to expect. Okay, then we could go deeper and again and again. It's more of a case of like an onion. Like, you peel the layers of an onion, and I was almost going to reference Shrek there. Like ogres are like onions, people are like onions. So you have to peel back the layers.
Sorry, podcast listeners, that's an in-joke between me and Alex, which he's just revealing on the podcast. But oh dear, we should have.
People.
I was just saying, we need to decide how much we tell people about our weird names for one another and all of the things that we do. Maybe not on episode 1.
No, maybe on episode 6.
Okay,
something like that.
And we schedule that
more. But yeah, I think there are levels, and
I love what you just said, and there is also this theme of vulnerability being cool now, and there's a lot of sham vulnerability happening. But just to say, I have struggled myself with how vulnerable to be in the public forums, in the Instagram stuff. And I have friends who've been, oh my God, you share so much on Instagram. I'm like, it's not stuff that I'm in the middle of processing. It's stuff that I've processed. It's stuff that I've done the work on. And it's not me being currently traumatized or triggered. It's me sharing the learning of a previous triggering. And as a coach, I will share my story with people if it's relevant to what they're going through. And I think my insights can help them. But not something I'm not going to have a meltdown on Instagram. That's not what I do. But to speak to your point, and this is so relevant, you and I are not sitting here saying we've done the work. We're saying we know how to do the work, and we are still triggered. So just to give a really good example of what you've just said, people, if you're listening to this in a time current state, people will know that I'm in the middle of doing a really deep master coaching program at the moment, in which we all coach each other, get coached. It's relentless. We're coaching 1 million hours a week. And actually, I've put less on Instagram in the last, my business has gone to hell because I'm so busy and holding so many containers and I don't have the space. But on Thursday, the week just gone, I was being coached by somebody, and it went very deep. and it didn't need to, and it was in a public forum where everyone else was listening. And I don't have massive support structures around me at the moment, certainly not proximal, not local to me. And I spiraled on Thursday night, and I know my stuff and I know my work, and I knew that I was spiraling, so I was very conscious within that spiral. But it's still, if we're not held in a safe container, which I didn't feel I had been on that call, through nobody's fault, it was just not the right situation. It can bring up so much. So it's very, very important that we are, I was going to say role models. We can probably use that term, can't we? Us like great sixth line beings, which we will explain in a future episode. So just dropping all these hints, it's like just like making you come back for more. But yeah. So yes, we will talk about all the things that we do. And yeah, so
and to add to what you're saying, like I find it's really interesting when you get into those moments. I feel it's those moments where, let's say, you are not held or as vulnerable. That's where like people like you and I, or at least people who have been trained in, say, the nutrition aspect and who see things holistically, can then use food as medicine, can use herbs as medicine to help anchor you back down and to bring you back to a solid base. And I feel that's kind of where our work comes full circle, because yes, we know we're spiraling, or yes, we know we are in a vulnerable state, or we are being triggered, or whatever it is, right? We know within ourselves what is right for us to help bring us back down to a state of, okay, cool, I'm grounded, I've got my feet on the ground, there's not quicksand, I'm not in the ocean, I'm on solid land, I can carry on walking. And I feel
that's where the physical stuff comes in. That's where the super physical stuff comes in. So we're not saying like the whole world is physical. We're saying the whole world is spiritual. We're saying the world is very physical. And I mean, to be fair, and to be super honest, my method of choice on Thursday was brandy and not herbs and all of the nice stuff. And yet, consciously doing it was the way through. But Alex has a great herbal practice. He's the king of herbs. So we will do a whole podcast on herbs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because these tools and just knowing your kind of safe spaces to go back to, it means that doing these, dark nights of the soul don't have to be, alcohol supported. they can actually be, supported by other things. So much rich stuff to come.
So much. And then it'll be a case of how do we get us to shut up about it? Which will be wonderful for our listeners, because you get the true insight into the wonderful and also completely mad ways in that our mind, body, and spirit works, and especially in unison together. And you should hopefully be getting, your notepads out, your pens out, and making notes on all the juicy gossip and all the juicy stuff that we bring to you.
Definitely. Before we conclude this first episode, do you want to introduce our two mascots, please?
Absolutely. So our team mascot in white, the wonderful Misty. And in beige, at the top of the bed, claiming his throne, the wonderful Artemis, aka Artie.
For those not watching the video of the version of this podcast, they are cats. just to be super clear.
Beautiful cats, and everyone adores them, because honestly, I mean, I will very much try not to show you photos on the podcast of how adorable they are, but I was sandwiched in this morning, Misty on the left, Artie on the right. I mean, I couldn't think of a better way to start celebrating Easter Sunday first thing in the morning. And then I knew I was going to come on this wonderful podcast. I was like, this day's just going great. And I see the sun outside. I'm like, I've got the trifecta of what I need today to have a wonderful Easter. Sponsored by Misty and Artie.
Misty and Artie. And just to let everyone know that sometimes when I need support or therapy, you just send me photos of those cats and you're like, see?
Yes. Life is better now.
Life is better. No, honestly, they are some kind of super, I was going to say superhuman, but that doesn't really apply. Super feline beings.
Oh, absolutely. They are the top space holders I have ever encountered in terms of feline space holding. I'm not going to lie. I've been on a number of journeys and they've just come in the room, they've held the space, and it's been incredible.
Amazing. So our little team of two humans and two moggies, we shall conclude our first episode there. Thank you so much if you're listening to this, and we hope that you go on the journey with us, because this should be quite an interesting one.
Absolutely. So please subscribe and share it if you feel like sharing it, of course. Let your friends know about what we're doing and all the other stuff.
Yeah, great. Lovely to be started on this, Alex.
Absolutely, Victoria.